Welcome to Awaken Empowered TV. I'm Micheila Sheldan. I'm here with Ethann Fox, and I'm in the host chair tonight as we'll be talking more to Ethann about his background and how he got into everything that he's working on in the world, including his organization, Flower of Life, and the Awaken Empowered Expo. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that the Awaken Empowered Expo is coming up this April 24th through the 26th at the Met in Troy, Michigan. And we have a variety of speakers and lectures and demonstrations that are all encompassing every area that is emerging in human consciousness, alternative health. We have science. We have vibrational healing, sound healing. We have, oh my goodness, all different walks of areas that are emerging in the new age.
Pyramids in Bosnia.
Oh yeah, definitely. Archaeology, ancient archaeology. So join us, and we hope you'll check out the website. It's awakenempoweredexpo.com. You can look at our schedule of events, and there's something there for everybody. So we hope you'll join us. Now, Ethann is the founder of the organization, the Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution, which is the team or the grease behind the expo and throwing that together. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the organization and how that all came to be. But just to let the audience know, you and I met probably about 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it's been over, yeah.
And at the time, I was going through a difficult period and really beginning my own spiritual awakening, and found the Flower of Life in a Google search, looking for something in my neighborhood that I could attend that was spiritually based, and came across your energy transfer and discourse. And it really opened my eyes, and I was purely amazed at your gifts, but also the way it really catapulted me into my own journey and coming out as a channel in the world. So let's start there and tell me a little bit about your gifts and how you came into all of this.
Oh, that's a long story. Well, it's been a few years now that I've been doing this in events, and I started out in actually April of 2012, I think it was. Yeah, that I did my first event. And as it turns out, I've later found out that this physical body has been doing this automatically my entire life. And I found that, of course, partly by channeling for me through my spirit guides. Which has been great because I was able to speak to the consciousness responsible for that. But one of the things they told me was that my entire life I've been doing this work without consciously being aware that I was doing it. And so it makes a lot of sense because in my life I've had a lot of very unusual experiences. But prior to a few years ago, I lived a very conventional life. I was a professional trader. I used to teach traders how to trade the markets. And I ran a business for quite a number of years. My entire adult life, really, I had a business of some kind. And so I was from a very business, financial background, very left brain. And so when a lot of those unusual things happened in my life, I couldn't really rationalize them. So I just put them on the shelf and forgot about them and didn't really think much about it until a few years ago. And even when I was in my early 20s, I met a lot of psychics who were telling me that I had these unusual gifts and I was going to do something big in the world someday. And but again, it really had no substance or significance then, and so I just filed it away. So it was about a few years ago, a little over a few years ago, that I met Barb, who we'll interview here as well. She's going to be at the expo. She's an aura reader. And Flower of Life used to have, and we still have raw food events, but we used to have a raw food potluck every month, a couple times a month. And so people would come, bring food, and we'd share. And Barb had, one of our regulars at our potluck had met Barb at a gas station, actually, and they started talking, and she invited her to our potluck. And she tells the story better than I do. But anyway, so she came to our event, and and was trying out the food and everything. And before she left, she told her friend, well, I've got to talk to this guy before I leave. And so she came up to me in front of the whole group, and she said, you have the biggest aura I've ever seen. And the colors, she said that apparently the way she experiences auras, she can see not only colors that change from moment to moment, which are based on your emotions or health or things like that, but there are also certain core colors that represent the consciousness of a person, and those colors never change. And so certain colors that she sees in the aura will tell her what's the level of consciousness of that person. And so according to her, my colors in my aura are such that she believes that I was an enlightened master. And so I'm skeptical, and especially when somebody tells me stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I tested her without her knowing. I had her come over one day, and she doesn't know spiritual masters. I know who a lot of them are, and so I showed her pictures of them because she could see. I actually showed her a picture of me when I was about 9 years old. It was a black and white picture, and actually no, that was a color picture, but I showed her black and white pictures also. And in the color picture, she could see that my energy field was the same. So as it turns out, my physical body had that ability from birth. It wasn't something I later learned. Although I had taken healing classes here and there, Reiki, for example, but the ability was always there. So anyway, I decided to test her since she could see this in pictures. So I showed her videos and pictures of other spiritual masters who are very well known, and thinking, well, if I wanted to see if she would see. And sure enough, she could tell the differences between the different spiritual masters compared to people who were ordinary people who she didn't know. And she was seeing the same energy, the same field size, and the same colors of consciousness that she saw in me. So, and I even switched some things around just to trick her, just to make sure, because I had to be sure, right? Yeah. And so that experiment made me realize, okay, well, if this person, and I want to say she's in her 60s or 70s, so she's been seeing aura since she was 5 years old, or very young, from birth, and so it got me thinking, well, if this person's been seeing auras her entire life and she's never seen an aura as big as mine, then I have to take a serious look at that, because something is going on there. And if it's true, then it explains a lot of the things that have happened in my life that I couldn't really explain. And if that's true, then I must be here for a purpose, and I have to find out what that is. So it got me to thinking about a lot of things that happened in my life, and it made me. So I decided from that I had to do an experiment. Going back to my rational left brain thinking, right? I had to validate whether or not this was true. And so, just as an experiment, in April of 2 years ago, I got a group of people together. There were about 25 people in the first group, and Barb was there. And my intention was, and there's a reason why I did this, and I can talk about that later, but my intention was that I was going to ask all the people in the group to send their negative energy and karma to me. Now, I had no idea what was really going to happen. But from an experience that I'd had earlier in my life, I thought that I might have the ability to do that. And so I asked them, send me all your negative energy, which any healer would never do, because you don't want people to send your negative energy, because most people are actually trying to protect themselves from that, right? Right. But I had the feeling that I was able to take that from other people and not have it affect me. And so I asked them to do that. And I also decided I was going to send energy to them to raise their consciousness. And so Barb was there. And so while I was doing this process, I gave a brief lecture, and so about 15 minutes of the time I did this, and Barb was there, and she watched the room, and she could see the energy, actually. She could see all this dark energy coming from everyone in the room to me. And she could see this white light energy going from my heart center to everyone in the room. And after it was done, everybody's auras had increased in size. And she said, well, from her perception, everybody's auras were about 2 or 3 inches from their bodies. And when we were done, it had tripled or quadrupled. And so we started doing this on a monthly basis, again, purely experimental at the time. And what we found was the people who came month after month, their auras actually stayed bigger. And the ones who had come many months in a row, she could see them when they were walking in the room. Their auras were actually hitting the ceiling when they were walking in the room versus being a few inches. Whereas the new people had auras that were very small. So that's how I started doing this. And since then, I've been working remotely. So from there, and of course, I thought, okay, well, I can do this in person with people. And I was really skeptical about whether I could do it remotely. But I had people start asking me if I would do it on radio shows. And so I did it on radio shows, and it worked on a radio show, even though I didn't know who was listening. And then I did it remotely with people around the world who were not even listening to me. And now I have weekly programs as well where I never talk to the person who's receiving the energy. I just schedule it at a certain time, and the energy is transmitted, and they send the negative energy to me remotely. And it works every single time. So
tell me, back up a little bit. You said that you had some very unusual experiences early on in your life that were probably indicators of what was happening here. Can you talk to that a little bit and tell us what some of those were?
Well, there are a lot of stories, but I'll start with the one that is, and if you want me to continue with other ones, I can, but I'll start with the one that actually made me think that I had the ability to take negative energy away from somebody, because that's kind of an unusual thing. You don't see healers do that sort of thing.
Right.
It was 1997, actually, and I had met these two women who were about my age at the time, and they turned out to be soulmates. And I found out that because we did past life regression. We did hypnosis on one of the girls, and she regressed to a past life with both of us. And I was actually working with other past life modalities at the time. And this other modality practitioner I went to actually intuited the same life, one of the same lives that the two girls and I also regressed into. And so it turned out we had this soul connection. And sure enough, all kinds of very unusual things happened between us, things that I could not make any rational sense of, because at the time I was kind of thinking in a more ordinary way. Although I've always had a spiritual thread throughout my life, I really didn't blend it into my life. So I started working. Actually, the one woman, she was married, and her husband had a heart condition, serious heart condition, and I started working with him, doing energy work, not really believing that I could do anything. But most of my life, most of my adult life, I should say, I believed that I had abilities with energy, but I was very skeptical, so I never did anything with it. But whenever somebody came to me with a life-threatening situation, I felt like I have to do something, because if I don't and something bad happens to them, I'll always wonder if I could have done something. So I always went ahead and did it anyway in those instances. And this is one of those cases where he had a serious issue. And so I would go over their house several times a week, and I would do energy work on him. And the other girl, and usually his wife and the other girl were there, and they would watch. And but on one occasion, I had the feeling that I had to work on one of the two girls. Mm-hmm. And this particular girl, she had a lot of emotional problems. She was always very stressed out and overwhelmed and very emotional. And she expressed to me shortly after we'd met that she'd had this lifelong nightmare. And in the nightmare, it was her, and she had sisters, and they were all in this nightmare, and it was a very bad situation. And it had been going on for as far back as she could remember, this repeating nightmare. And when she met me, I started appearing in the nightmare, which apparently nobody had ever appeared in her nightmare that was not already there. Mm. And in this nightmare, I rescued her from this situation. Now, we didn't know what that meant. And so on this one particular night, I'm working on this woman's husband, and he went to bed. And then I told this other girl, I said, well, I really feel like I've got to do something with you today. But she just would not let me touch her. She was afraid because she could feel the energy that I had, which at the time I didn't know I was anything unusual. But she said, no, I don't want you to touch me because I'm afraid of the consequences, like what would happen. And I didn't know consequences either at the time. And so she started crying, and I said, okay, I don't have to do anything. I said, just give me a hug and we won't do anything. And so she gave me a hug, but in that hug, something passed on from her to me. Now, keep in mind, I'm a very left brain, rational kind of guy. And so it made no sense to me, but I knew something just happened because this was summertime and it was warm out and my body was very warm from just doing a healing. And I went ice cold. And it felt literally like something black had just covered my entire body. I mean, that was my instinct, my feeling of what it was. And so I didn't know what it was. All I knew is I needed to leave because I felt like whatever that was, I don't want to give it to anybody else. And so I left and I drove home and it was hot out, but I was blasting the heat in my car because I was freezing. So I went home that night and I went to bed and I had nightmares, which I never have. And so I woke up in the middle of the night scared, afraid. And the next day I woke up and whatever that was gone. So it wasn't with me anymore. But replaced with it was this feeling of just total bliss. And I'd never experienced, at that point in my life, I'd never experienced it before. And I can't quite describe it in words, except, I went outside and it just felt like the colors were more vivid. The grass was greener. The sounds were, more, just had more intensity to them, the smells. And I just had this feeling of joy and this feeling like if I'd lost everything that I had in the world, it wouldn't matter in that moment. And I tried very hard to hold on to that feeling of bliss, but I just couldn't. A day and a half later, it went away. It just faded slowly away. And but I had this feeling that was just a window into my future, that I was being shown something that I was going to do later. And that's all that was what was for. And so later on, that girl, she told me that the nightmare went away. So she never had it again. So it occurred, and now I didn't make anything of it until a few years ago. But I look back and I think, obviously she was carrying some kind of either karmic weight, or either it could have been psychological, it could have been childhood trauma. It's hard to say. It could have been a past life that was expressing in that dream. But whatever it is, she couldn't handle it. She had it for her entire life and could not get rid of it. But in that moment, she'd give it to me and I could get rid of it. And so a few years ago when I started doing these events, that was the experience that came to my mind. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could do that in a group setting and it doesn't really affect me, but that person no longer has it. And so they're lighter and they're relieving something, psychological energy, karmic energy that's weighing them down and weighing down their life experience. And it may take them a lifetime or lifetimes to get rid of whatever that is or work through it. But in an instant, I can take that away. So that was one of the stories, and that's really what inspired me to start doing these events in public forum.
I love that story.
There's another story, actually, that I can tell you. It happened, I want to say it was 1994. It was before I knew I had any unusual ability or anything. I had a girlfriend then. And her grandfather was dying of cancer. And now he was basically bedridden. He couldn't get out of bed, and he was, doctors had given him a very short amount of time. I'm trying to think. I think it was about 3 weeks to live or something like that, small amount of time. And, well, it was one of those situations where when I was younger, I felt like, well, if I don't do something and I could have helped this person, I'll always wish I'd done something. And so I didn't really believe I had any healing ability. to be honest, but I decided to try anyway. And he didn't believe in any of this stuff. So, but I talked him into it. And I think just because he liked me, he let me try. And so I would go over to his house after my work every day, and I would do a healing session. And now he told me that his only wish was he wanted to be able to, now he was in Michigan, of course, and he wanted to go up in the Upper Peninsula where he had a cabin, and he wanted to take his family there for a weekend and just spend a weekend with them like his normal self. And then he wanted to come back home and just give away all of his stuff because he wanted to have the power to do it himself so that he didn't have to leave it in a will for somebody else to do. And he wanted to be able to just go to an ordinary grocery store and just shop on his own. So it was just simple little wishes he had. That's all he wanted to do. But he couldn't do any of it because he couldn't get out of bed. And he had only 3 weeks to live, or some short amount, 2 or 3 weeks. I don't remember exactly. But so I started doing healings on him. In my mind, I thought, well, if he doesn't get cured of cancer, then it didn't work. Okay, so I started working with him, and sure enough, after a few days, he actually got up out of bed. And a week later, he was going grocery shopping. And he did end up going to his cabin with his whole family and enjoying a weekend there, and he was perfectly fine. He then gave away all of his things, and he actually gave me, and I still have it, he gave me, he was some kind of a craftsman, I can't remember what, but he had this wood case that's for fine, like really fine carving tools and things, not just carving tools, but some kind of tools case. And apparently it's worth a lot of money. I didn't know what it just looked like a wood case to me, but he built it himself apparently. And I guess those kind of tool cases built that way are very hard to come by. And so he gave me this, and this was his most prized possession. I didn't really realize that at the time, but so he gave it to me, and so he gave away all his stuff, and then he told me, I don't want you to do any healing work on me anymore. And for me, that was, I thought, well, I don't want to stop, and he says, well, I've done everything I wanted to do. I gave away my things. I enjoyed a weekend with my family. I got out of the house. I feel like I'm done. And that was a hard thing for me because in my mind, I thought, well, if I don't cure him of cancer, then I failed. Mm-hmm. But he was done. He had reached the end of his journey. He knew it. And somehow in the healing work that I was doing with him, he came to that realization and he felt complete. Mm. And within a couple of days of me stopping, he died. And for many years, I saw that as a failure. But looking back, I realized I gave him what he needed, at the time. There was another interesting story. There was a woman I used to long time ago. I used to work in an apartment complex, and I was in this woman's apartment, and we were talking, and she was quite an elderly woman, not in very good health, and she was having this migraine headache. And again, this is another person who doesn't believe in any kind of holistic anything, let alone energy healing. And I, again, didn't believe I had any ability. But she was telling me how she'd get these migraine headaches and she would go blind for a period of time. And she was telling me these stories about sometimes she'd be driving down the road and she'd just suddenly go blind. And she'd have to somehow get her car to the side of the road without being able to see what she's doing without causing an accident. Mm. And so I'm in her apartment and she's telling me this story, and I'm thinking, I can't leave her not having tried, because what if she causes an accident, Right. And so I told her, I said, you know what, just keep talking. She loved to talk. So I said, just keep talking. Would you mind if I just stood behind you for a few minutes? And she said, okay, no problem. And so I stood behind her. I didn't actually touch her. I just put my hand like this behind her body, behind her head. And I said, just tell me what's going on with your headache. And so she was describing every few minutes. She said, oh, well, the headache's moved over here. It's moved over here. And then finally, after about a half hour, 45 minutes, it was just a pinpoint size headache. And and then it vanished. So I left her apartment, and I was thinking it's just a coincidence. She was thinking it was just a coincidence. I didn't think much of it. And next day, she, first thing in the morning, starts calling our office frantically, and we weren't even open. But finally we answered, and she was raving because apparently, now, prior to me working on her, not only was she having migraine headaches, she could not walk without a cane or a walker. She couldn't lift her hand above chest area. So she had to wash her hair in the kitchen sink using the spray in the kitchen sink because she couldn't lift her hand in the shower to wash her hair. And she had a list of medications that you wouldn't believe. And suddenly the next day she could walk without a cane or a walker. She could lift her hand over her head. And she said she has not felt, said, I haven't felt this good in 7 years. And over the course of a month or two, she started taking less medication and she was feeling great. So that was another amazing. Now, those are both health stories. And that does tend to happen at my events, but it just is just some really interesting illustrations of how the healing has worked over the years.
One of my favorite stories that you tell, and you've had so many amazing ones, with health breakthroughs and otherwise, but is about the dogs. The 2 dogs that started getting
yeah. That was Dan and there was that woman I shared the earlier story who has cystic fibrosis. Yeah. And so she got better, and one of the things that they were really curious because he emailed me and said, well, is it possible it could affect dogs too? And because apparently they have these 2 dogs that don't get along and they're always fighting. And as soon as I put her on the weekly program and started doing the energy transfers, these dogs just started playing together. And they would just hang out together, and they just seemed like they were the best friends, and which was totally unexpected. And I have worked on animals over the years, and it does affect animals just as well as people. So there was that impact also. Yeah, that was really fascinating.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So you've taken that experience and now you do this in a group setting. And I'm very sensitive to energy, and I've attended, many of your sessions remotely and in person. And I experience the energy very dramatically. I feel it. And I've had, some amazing things blossom in my life, not only my gifts, but even just releasing a lot of lower vibrational karma and worry, feeling a lot lighter. Tell me, is the experience the same for everybody, or is it unique? And what kind of feedback have you had, and what do these people experience when they attend an energy transfer?
Well, what I tell people is, as unique as your physical body is different from the next person, you're going to experience it uniquely. So, because your energy body's as unique. So there's no 2 people who have the exact same energy body or the exact same karmic energy or the exact same physical body. There's always a difference. And that difference is going to make every person experience it differently. I've had people come to my events. Now, I don't really... my purpose is really not to heal health issues, but it happens anyway. And I've had a lot of people come to my events. Couple of stories that popped into my mind. Last year, there was a woman that came to my event who had some kind of hip injury, and she had been taking some pretty strong pain medication for years. And she came to the first event and came back to my next event the following month and said the pain completely went away that first night, and she never took the pain medication again. I had a woman just a couple months ago actually came to one of my events here physically, and she had some kind of a shoulder injury or pain, and she also had it for years, and it completely went away the first time she came. There's actually a woman out in New Jersey who contacted us, her, about 3-4 months ago, I think. And she was having a problem with, I think, cystic fibrosis.
Cystic fibrosis, right? Yes.
And doctors had given her a few weeks to live, or a couple weeks, something like that. I could be wrong on that, but a very short time. Yeah. And I thought, well, what's the harm? I just put her on my weekly program and figured no harm done if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And she's still fine. And it's been 4 months. And now since then, they're doing all kinds of other things to supplement that. And she's apparently, her health is getting better and better and better. And and I actually invited her to the expo, and I said, well, the expo is in April, which is months away. And I said, I expect you to be there. So, but she's doing great apparently. And so I've had a lot of people have major health breakthroughs. But like I said, one of the most common things, Barb says, their aura energy fields expand. And so when your aura expands, it's going to affect physical health. It's going to affect your emotional well-being. It's also going to protect you. Like a lot of people, the majority of people, and from channeling with you and speaking to my guides, I found that the majority of people who come to me and my events are light workers. So people who are really out to heal the world in some way or another. And I found that to be true, actually. And I wouldn't have known that had you not channeled that, but I found that to be true. And one of the things, a lot of light workers are healers, physical healers of some kind. And one of the most common issues that healers have is that they take on the negative energy of other people they're healing. And so a lot of healers are actually in the worst shape because protecting yourself is not a very easy thing to do sometimes. And you don't always think of it. And a lot of healers are sensitive, highly sensitive, like you're highly sensitive.
Exactly.
And so because of that, they have a hard time being around other people. They have a hard time doing healings. And yet that's what they do is, they have to do healings. And so when your energy field gets bigger, you have an automatic protection. Now, I never tell people you should do what I do and ask a group of people to send you negative energy. My physical body has been prepared in this life. And I learned that from your channeling sessions too, that this physical body has been prepared in this life to do this. And so I can do it without even thinking. But what it does for healers and light workers is they have a protective barrier. So they can do healings, they can be around other environments or negative environments, and they're not pulled down by it. They're not taking that on because that energy field that's now bigger has the ability to burn away that negative environment. Which is what Barb sees when I do an event, is she sees all this dark energy disintegrate as it hits my energy field. So those are some of the effects. Now, the most common thing, people's happiness level go up, which because my intention is raising consciousness. And I believe that's my purpose is raising consciousness. The health and all those other things will come along with it. But and one of the most common things that happens with the raising consciousness is your happiness level increases. It doesn't mean you never have a bad day. I have them too. But when your consciousness increases and your karma goes down, you find that you bounce back from things a lot easier. You might have bad days or bad weeks, but you're not as attached to them as much. A lot of people, like let's say somebody gets divorced, they're still complaining about their husband or wife 20 years from now. And that is because of an attachment. But when your consciousness is higher, attachments don't happen the same way. And so you don't have those negative attachments as much. And so one of the side effects is increase in happiness and, more joy in your life. And that tends to happen a lot of times with people the same while they're there. A lot of people experience bliss, states of bliss while they're sitting in the room. And then as the weeks progress, they usually feel better and better and things just go better. I have some people who are on my weekly program who have been on it for the last couple of years, I think, year and a half, since I started it basically. And they just are, just very happy people. I mean, they're just, every time they email me, they're just, so thrilled. And I find that that's one of the most common things that happens.
Yeah, I definitely had that experience very early on in your energy transfers. And what I noticed was the first couple I came to, I was really releasing a lot of emotional karma. I actually had an emotional response during your energy transfers where I would start to cry. But I would get home and I would just notice how, at least for the next several days, I would feel lighter. Things wouldn't bother me. Those things that were really on my mind that were weighing me down weren't even on my mind anymore. And then the more I went, it stuck and it stuck and it stuck longer. Now, I know that when you are doing the show, your energy is going to be coming through the transmission here to the audience who's watching. And that's always happening, correct?
Yeah.
So, and you talked about a lot of the positive effects. Are there any adjustment periods that people would look out for or expect as far as, their energy body having to assimilate into this new balance?
Well, for years, as I mentioned, I was running this raw food potluck, and I wondered why people, and not just at the raw food potluck, we have other lectures and events at Flower of Life, and people were commenting that they just felt so happy whenever they came to our events, and for weeks after, they just couldn't wait to come back, and they were just so happy. And I just thought for a while, well, at first I thought maybe it's a food, it's raw food after all. But then it started happening at other events. People started commenting, and I thought, well, I don't know. Maybe it's something in the air. I have full spectrum lights in the ceiling. Maybe it's that. I never really thought much about it being because I was there until Barb showed up, and then I thought, oh, well, it must be that. So, and I wasn't intentionally trying to do anything, but it seemed like any environment that I'm in, that energy is always happening. This physical body is always channeling that energy through this higher consciousness. And they, in channeling with you, I asked them, well, why don't you just send the energy yourself? Why do you need me? And they said, well, because of the physical dimension, they need a physical body in order to send that energy to other physical people, physical beings. And so I just chose to do that. And I was at a certain level of my development where I could do that. And so in this life, this body is specifically prepared for that. So it's happening all the time. There are people around me who are sensitives, and they're sensitive to energy, and they will, if I'm just sitting in a room, they'll feel it. Or if I'm just sitting next to them, they'll feel it, even though I'm not doing anything.
Right.
So it happens even on the show, even if I'm not intending to. Although when I do the events, I intend to, and during the 15 minutes of my live events, I increase the intensity of the energy so people feel it more strongly. And I ask them to send the negative to me during that time, even though it's happening anyway. Their higher consciousness and the higher consciousness that works through me is facilitating the process regardless. But the people who intentionally come to my events for that purpose, they get a little extra because in that 15-minute period that I usually do it, we kind of increase the intensity.
Right.
Now, side effects typically only happen with a small number of people who come to my events for the first time. Once the first time happens, it somehow their body seems to adjust, and it never happens again. And it rarely happens anyway to begin with. But there are a few people in my audience who they'll start crying for no reason, and they won't know why. Some will laugh, and they don't know why. The thing you have to understand is when that happens, what's happening is we're releasing karma, okay? And there's emotional energy usually attached to it. And it could be this life, it could be a past life. And you may not know why, but the karma that's released could have been related to a past life where there was some emotional issue that when released, they felt the emotion that came along with it. And so people will cry. So that happens sometimes. Some people feel temperature changes in the body. They'll feel, and I've had both. Some people feel ice cold instantly, and other people feel really hot. I've had a few people fall asleep, which that happens. And that reason that happens, sometimes it's probably because they're just tired, but sometimes it actually happens because the soul, because the guides that person is working with, the intensity of the energy is too much for them to handle. And so sometimes they will actually remove the soul from the body, do the work, and send it back. And so sometimes people fall asleep. I've had a few people, like they have an intensity in their head, and they'll go home and it'll just feel like a headache until the next day. That's happened. Small number of people will get really exhausted where they have to sleep extra for the next couple of days. And that's normal. And that can happen as the energy works through and assimilates. There's one guy once who came to my event. I've never had anybody else report this. It could have happened. I don't know. But he couldn't sleep for 3 days. He just had so much energy, he couldn't sleep. So there are a few people, there's nausea happens. Some people get nauseous, and that's also quite common with intense energy work. So those are some of the side effects that seem to occur. It's nothing permanent if that does happen. It's just because everybody's physical body is different. And so it reacts to the energy differently. And some people's bodies just shut down while the energy's assimilating, and other people's bodies don't need that. And if their consciousness is already high, they're probably not going to notice any symptom at all. If their consciousness is very low, they might notice a little bit. It depends. And their sensitivity level. Like people like you who are very sensitive,
Right.
and I do end up with a lot of sensitives in my audience. They feel the energy, either like a vibration or, I don't know, how do you feel it exactly?
Well, it's interesting because I feel and I see. So I feel, I almost feel that flow of energy where I'm sending and you're receiving. I feel the energy sent, but I feel that what you've always said is you send a heart light energy from, your center of your heart chakra. And I feel that very dramatically. But when you shift that last 15 minutes and you send that energy out, it almost comes out in a very flat, way. But I've also witnessed many guides in the room. I mean, it's a very beautifully guided process, and it varies a bit, from time to time. And, with our expo meetings and our team, Ethann's always giving our team energy transfers, and we connect that way at our meetings. And what's been really beautiful for me to watch is there's always been a guide in the room with the team kind of working individually with each person. So I've experienced a lot of different things during your energy transfers, but I definitely feel the energy always the same this way, and then that flat going out very intensely.
Yeah, and from channeling with you, I was able to speak with the consciousness that's doing this. And so, which was very interesting. It explained a lot of things, because as it turns out, so when I use the word karma, if you don't mind, I could talk about that. When I use the word karma, because of spiritual, a lot of people have a certain preconception of what karma is, and I use it a little different way, although it encompasses a lot of the preconceptions. Karma, when I use the word karma, could be something from a past life. So let's say, or it could be from this life. Let's say you steal $10 from somebody. Now you've got that karmic debt. But does it necessarily mean that somebody's going to steal $10 from you someday in order to balance that? Not necessarily. When you do something like that, where you knowingly, intentionally do some things, do harm to somebody else, or even harm to yourself. So a negative thought can be karma. But that $10 you took from somebody else isn't going to manifest as $10 taken away from you necessarily. It might, but it's more like energetic. So that $10 goes into an energetic bank account, your karmic bank account. So now you have a debt in that account. So you owe that debt in an energetic sense. And that debt has to be paid off at some point in your life experience. And so that debt is carried in your energy body, and it weighs down your experience. So throughout lifetimes and in this lifetime, from experiences like that, everybody brings a certain amount of karmic weight into this life. So if you had two people who were identical in every sense, but one had a lot of karma, and if they had identical lifetimes, the one with karma is going to suffer more in this life, and everything is going to seem worse than it is and more challenging, even though it's the same life. Whereas the one who has a higher consciousness, less karma, is going to sail through life, even the hard parts, with a lot more ease. And so, especially nowadays, a lot of people are struggling, and if we can remove that weight from them, their lives become lighter automatically. So when I use karma, now I'm referring to this energy that we're carrying in our energy body. Now, I want to be clear though, everybody needs to have at least a little bit of karma. But you don't need a lot. I mean, a lot causes suffering. But in order to be in the physical dimension, you've got to have just a little bit of that energetic weight just so you can exist in this dimension. If you didn't have it, you would immediately transition. You wouldn't be able to stay here. So even a lot of the spiritual masters who say that they're enlightened, they really don't fully become enlightened until they leave, because they all have to have a certain amount of karma to remain here.
I see.
And there are a lot of stories, even in Yogananda's book, where they talk about some of these masters and how they maintained that karma in order to exist here. But when I channeled with you and spoke to this consciousness, they told me that I'm also relieving people of the energy that is from their environment. So, for example, they talked about GMO foods and chemtrails and fluoride and things like that. They explained that what happens is, well, when you're eating those things, they're physical.
Right.
Or when you're inhaling chemtrails, they're physical, but when they get into the body, they become vibrational. Which is true. I mean, the food we eat is energy for the body, and the matter part of it really doesn't stay in the body. It's to fuel the energy of the body. And so they said that what we're consuming that is adverse to our health creates a karmic weight, and that is also being relieved. And so they said, when a person comes to me to the events regularly, they're actually mitigating for environmental toxins as well.
So on that note, do you believe that as a person's consciousness raises, that they are somewhat immune to those lower vibrational foods and fluoride and things like that?
Yeah, we've channeled on that actually too. And yes, they are. And that's what the guide said, is that as your consciousness goes up, and so a certain number of light workers who have a high enough consciousness, they can actually eat GMO foods, not that they should, but they can, and it does not actually adversely affect them. They can be in an environment with chemtrails. It doesn't affect them. They can be around electromagnetic fields, and it doesn't really affect them. So it's not as bad as somebody who does not have that level of consciousness. So yeah, that's definitely true.
I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about light workers, because you mentioned that you are here to work with light workers. And you know, in my channeling, what my guides have been saying is that light workers are really going through a difficult karmic time right now, now out, 2-3 years especially. So tell me a little bit about why you think you're attracting light workers, and even more what I've observed in my work with you, and even as an individual, coming to you, this energy transfer process has really opened my path. And through the time that I was doing the energy transfers, I really stepped into my channeling gifts. I notice others around you tend to do the same thing. So tell me a little bit about that and how you're assisting that process.
Well, this is a combination of my experience with working with people like you, and also what you've channeled for me and other, this is a combination of different pieces of information. But what seems to be is that a lot of light workers can't find their way. This is one of the most common things I hear, because of our organization, everything we do, that's who's around us, right? And one of the most common things that I hear from people is that they can't find their purpose. They don't know why they're here. And some of them think they know their purpose, but they don't really know what to do with it. Part of the reason for that is the consciousness of the planet is inhibiting people from realizing who they are, light workers in particular. And so environmental factors such as geoengineering, chemtrails, fluoride, GMO foods are actually inhibiting light workers from discovering who they are. So if they don't know who they are, and they're continuing to be affected by those environmental factors, they will never figure out who they are. So there are a lot of light workers here with incredible abilities who have no idea that they have them. And there are a few who have some idea that they have something, but it's not awake enough in them that they know what to do with it. So the energy transfer process just by itself lifts that veil to where their abilities start awakening in them. And I've had that happen in so many people. Even in one time they came to one of my events or they participated in a remote session, they suddenly had an awakening, or some ability just started awakening in them. So that's, one thing that seems to happen. But on another note as well, because of my background in business and marketing and branding and those kind of things from my previous company and previous other businesses as well, I have the ability to be able to take a look at that ability once it starts emerging in someone, and to just have an understanding of how to put it out into the world in a way that can make them successful. Because one of the biggest challenges, we're going through a major shift in the world right now, right? But those new emerging fields, it's hard to know how to get it out there into the world to where people don't think it's a little weird, or, to reach the right audience and so on. So it's a combination of things.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because I know, your background is, you have a very extensive background in astrology, numerology, and in psychology, and you really blend all of that together to help lightworkers in this time. And I know through my own channeling for private clients, a lot of lightworkers are really facing that struggle right now with jumping from, a mainstream job and trying to bridge into bringing their light work into the world, but still be able to pay the bills, and that's something that you have a unique gift with as well. Can you really talk about the different tools that you use when you have someone come to you with this problem, and how you're able to bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's something I've started working with clients to do, actually. And, so I've been a student and practicing astrology and numerology for 21 years now, maybe a little longer than that. And I use a lot of Eastern and Western techniques, and I blend them into one, which is a little unusual because most astrologers focus on one kind of astrology and most numerologists focus on one kind of numerology. But I've sort of blended them, a variety of different techniques, into one understanding. And I find that it works better that way. So on the one hand, I can kind of see what's going on in the world. And from an astrological standpoint alone, we are in a period of great transition, and it's turbulent transition. But when we get into the 2020s through mid-2040 is when things are going to start taking off in a very positive direction. So we're in that period of time right now where we're still in a pressure cooker, and so a lot of people are struggling. And so when you channel, you talk about 5 years of difficult, and that's true. But from 2020 to mid-2040s is when everything breaks through. And all of these things that those of us who are more awakened, who are watching a show like this, would love to see in the world, we're going to see those things really materialize in our physical reality in that 20 years, 25 years from 2020 on and beyond. So that's sort of the underlying climate that exists. Okay. And so in this period of time, people are struggling, waking up, and the establishment is putting a lot of pressure on people to keep things the way they are, because the establishment, the government, and so on are really under the influence of this very low consciousness energy,
right?
And they don't want that to change, because they'll lose control. But they're going to anyway, because the cycles always, in the end, have the control.
And you see that in the astrology.
Sure. So we are right now in a period of time where we're supposed to struggle, where the establishment was supposed to suppress us, and where the people were supposed to rise up against it. And so until 2020 period, roughly, we're going to see that, and over the last several years, we're going to see that the establishment putting more restrictions on people. I mean, the last several years, we've had TSA and all this other stuff, right? And Common Core in schools now. So we're going to see that more and more restriction on people, but at the same time, people are going to push harder and harder until in the 2020s, it breaks through and the people will win, ultimately. So in the end, the establishment cannot win because the cycles are in favor of the people in the long run. So that's the climate that we're heading into. And in that future, we're going to see light workers really step into their power and into why they're here. I think that's part of the reason why I'm here, is to help in that awakening process so that they're ready to do that. Now, largely, though, it's going to be the kids who are now in their teens or so, who will be in their 20s in that time. They're born with certain things in their astrology chart that will be triggered in the 2020s and beyond. They're going to be largely responsible for the massive change. The adults, of course, too, but it's really the kids who are going to really be the driving force, I think. And you can see that now. A lot of the kids who are in their teens now, they're much more awake and alert and fighting the system than you would think they should be.
I can testify to that.
Yes.
I have one who's living with me.
Right.
My daughter, yeah, definitely.
So there is that undercurrent. Okay. So astrology is part of what I do. Now, if I look at a person's astrology chart and numerology, I can see the kind of a big picture of why they're here, some of their gifts, and I can also see where things are holding them back. A lot of people, I find that their names really hold them back. Their names are inhibiting factors in their life that help prevent them from reaching their potential.
Right.
Okay. And so that's one factor that we always address and so like in your case, you changed your name.
Yeah.
I changed my name. A lot of my clients changed their name. And so to something that's going to be more empowering and it's going to support your work in the world. And also it will support your relationships better as well. And I think relationships are a huge part of it. I've spent a lot of time studying relationship psychology and marriage psychology and so on, and just psychology in general, neuroscience, to try to understand, why the body works a certain way, why people think and feel a certain way. So I bring all of that into the formula. But I used to own a marketing agency, a branding marketing agency, and so I have an eye and an understanding of how to develop a good brand. I think that's one of the most common things that people who are in fields of light work do wrong. Not that there's a right or wrong, but if you want to reach your marketplace, you have to present yourself in a way that the marketplace is used to, right? And so if you go out there and you in as a typical light worker, and you present yourself, build a website and all these things in a certain way, people aren't going to respond to that quite as well as if you have an eye for appropriate branding and you think that process through and you represent yourself a certain way. Like your website, for example, we went through that whole process, right? And so as a channel, you don't look like any other channels out there. We were very careful about branding you a certain way that fits who you are, but it expresses it in a very concise way, and it reaches your market and it makes you stand out. And so I bring those elements into the formula as well. But then there are also certain things like changes in lifestyle and diet that I would recommend, because I think diet makes a huge difference. If people are eating a lot of junk food and have a really poor diet, it actually inhibits your consciousness and it makes you less. Your brain doesn't work the same way. You're not able to think as well or clearly. And I found a lot of people who came to our raw food events month after month, some of them were not interested in spiritual things at all when they first came in. But as they switched more and more to a raw food diet, they suddenly became interested in spiritual things. Sometimes they had gifts open up in them. They became happier, more positive. So diet is a huge factor. So I bring a lot of different components into the mix. So people I work with on a monthly basis doing that, I will look at their cycles to see where they are and where they, you don't want to start everyone out at the same place because not everybody's cycle is in the same place. So
when you say cycles,
let's just keep it simple and let's say numerology, for example, because astrology is going to be too hard to explain here. There's a 9-year cycle, for example, and everybody is a different place in their cycle. So if you're in year number 1, then you're starting over. So a lot of people in year number 1, a lot of them, they might have just ended a relationship or got divorced, or they just quit a job and they started a new one. It's a crossroads. So when people are going from the previous year to the 1 year, they're at a crossroads. Their lives are starting over.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, you don't necessarily want to take the biggest risks to do something really big. You want to keep things in perspective and decide that you're going to start a new life direction. It's a perfect time to start a new direction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, and usually at that point, people, and I have several people who start working with me in their 1 year actually. Mm-hmm. And it's a perfect time to start and decide, okay, I want to go in this new life direction. And I need help to do that. And so we get them started in that new life direction, building the brand, everything from identifying what their ability is to practicing it, getting good at it, getting up in front of people and doing it, and then taking it out into the world, creating the right brand and so on, and then launching it, and which is what we've done with you. And so in a 1 year, you have to understand that you might be starting out slow. But let's say you are in year number 4 in your cycles. Well, 4 is when things really start picking up momentum in a person's career path. And so in a 4 year, you can expect to be very busy. And so you would take a little bit more risk and do things a little bit bigger. But if you were in, let's say, year 6, 7, and halfway through the 8, that's when careers take off really big. So if you're at that point, you would take a little bit more risks. And so I would have people do things a little bit differently. I may ramp them up a lot faster to take advantage of the cycles, because the most successful period is going to be those 2.5 years, 3 year period, where a person can go from virtually being unknown in a particular field to being really well known if they really utilize that period of time. Where you wouldn't necessarily want to do that. Let's say you're in a year number 3. You wouldn't want to take too many risks because things don't go so well in terms of that. It's a good year to just sort of settle down and do the work and just be patient. Mm-hmm. If you take too many risks, they'll backfire in the 3 year. So there are different cycles, and depending on where the person is in that cycle, we would have them start differently. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sometimes you have to be a little patient, and sometimes you go full speed ahead. So those are important things. And you can also see cycles in the astrology. And if both the astrology and numerology cycles are really positive for growth, then that person tends to really take off in the field that they're starting out in much more quickly.
You mentioned the numerology of the name. So if there's a light worker out there who's starting to bring their gifts into the world and they're naming their website or their business, that name is just as important or critical as their name, correct? And even the date that they might start incorporating this business or promoting it is significant as well.
Oh yeah, even launching a Facebook page. I've had people who have had businesses, and because I've been an astrologer, numerologist for 21 years, and I've been in business and in the financial world, I used to use astrology in trading, analyzing companies and their stocks to see what was going on behind the scenes. And also in my own businesses over the years, I could track what was going to happen. And so I partly became good at it because of using it in my own businesses as examples. Mm-hmm. And as I launched more and more companies over the years, I started refining my technique. And so now I can look at a company's incorporation date or inception date, and I can tell where it struggles and where it succeeds. There are certain businesses and individuals who have great charts, birth charts. Like for example, I looked at the 2 founders of Google, and they have the kind of charts of billionaires, or at least multimillionaires. And when you put them together as partners, it's even stronger. So there's no doubt, there's no question why they became as successful as they did. So certain people are just born with that tendency. But if you're not born with that tendency, you can at least launch a company with the tendency built into the chart and also reflecting in your own chart. It's not only enough that the company chart has that strength, but it has to relate to yours well. If it relates to yours well also, then that company will be successful for you, not only just in itself. So it's a very complex thing because astrology is very complicated, especially when you're getting into business and financial astrology.
Right.
But yes, if you choose the right date, not only for numerology but also for the astrology chart, you can end up with a company that's going to do better. It doesn't mean you don't have to do any work if you have a great chart. You still have to put in the work. But if you have a chart that's hard and you have a chart that's much more supportive to success, and you put an equal amount of work, you're going to still be struggling with the one that's hard. Whereas the one that's, more supportive to success is going to take off.
Right.
So I've had a lot of business owners who have contacted me over the years to look at their business and to see whether they should sell the company or not. And I've advised them don't sell the company because you're just about to take off. And sure enough, the company was just on the verge of a huge period of success. Wow. So you can see those things. And so the name also is very important. If your name is weak or if it's unstable, then the company will be unstable or you'll be unstable. Right. Even in marriages, I have a lot of women who come to me for readings and they've been married multiple times. And just by looking at their names that they had in each marriage, I can tell what each marriage was like. And I can tell them, okay, well, this marriage was this way and this one was this way and so on. You can see that. So if you've ever known people who they've had a perfectly good relationship for years and then they get married and everything fell apart, it's usually because the woman's name changed. And in that change of name, the name became more unstable. And so her personality would have changed for the worse. And not that I blame the woman, but what happens is it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship. So suddenly they were perfectly fine before, but now they don't get along because the whole interaction changed when that name changed. And so you've got to be really careful with names. It's not an arbitrary thing. And even if you're naming your child, there are a lot of cute names out there, but there are a lot of cute names that are very unstable, that are not good. At least if you want your child to be happy and have a stable life, a lot of them are not very good for that. And so it's a very complex study, very fascinating.
Very fascinating,
I mean, that's what I love about astrology and numerology is I have a very intellectual mind and I can never learn it because it's a lifelong study. You're always learning and expanding and you can never stop learning. So,
well, what's been interesting, since we've been working so closely is I've been quite in tune with my own personal astrology chart through my interaction with you. So my question is, if we can look at someone's astrology chart and go backwards and forwards and see all these things, do we really have free will choice? And are we really making decisions day to day that are affecting our experience? Or in essence, is it already written and decided?
Well, that's a good question. And actually, it's a question that I've had a lot of people disagree with me on over the years. But of course, I have a very diverse experience in a lot of these areas. And I used to be not your typical, but I used to be a business guy, and for years. And so I was very focused on setting goals and reaching goals. And even when the Law of Attraction secret movie came out years ago, when it first came out, I watched it. And being the kind of guy who, if I become interested in something, I immerse myself in it. And so I tracked down all the people, not all, but a lot of the prominent people in the secret. And I went to see them in person. I studied under them. Even Esther Hicks, I saw her in person at events. I bought every book she had and started practicing these techniques. John Assaraf, who was in The Secret, who's the guy in the multi-million-dollar house. I hired him as a personal coach for a while and joined his program and learned under him. And so I was in this very small group of people who he was coaching who were applying these techniques. And he was at the forefront of neuroscience and law of attraction techniques, and that's what he taught. So in this class, in this group, there were very successful people I was with, and we all applied the same techniques.
Right.
But there were varying levels of success. And even myself, I applied the techniques very diligently. And I found that some things totally worked out. Other things were really hard and they just didn't manifest. And other things still didn't, went backwards. And I noticed that in the group too. There were some people in the group who their businesses just completely went backwards. And other people who flourished. And so I was, it was really curious because I studied these techniques for years and practiced them very intensely. And I was wondering, well, why is it that some people achieve such great success? Like John Assaraf, I mean, he's a multimillionaire.
Right, sure.
And and he teaches people how to become multimillionaires, right? And so I thought, well, why can he do it? Well, I got his birthday and his name and everything some years later, and I did calculated them out. I think I wrote an article on it on my website, actually. And turns out he has a predisposition to being a multimillionaire. So, of course, if he applies those techniques, he's more likely to succeed than not. No, he's even been bankrupt, but overall in his life, he's going to be more successful. So he can teach those techniques to people, but if they don't have the predisposition in their own astrology chart, they're not going to achieve that level of success. So getting back to the whole idea of law of attraction, my conclusion, and I've even channeled with the guides through you to ask this question, because my conclusion was, prior to doing the channeling sessions, was that law of attraction does not work by itself, because we can't simply attract anything we want. So if everybody in the world said, I want to be a multimillionaire and want to have this kind of car and this kind of relationship, we're not all going to get that. Or let's say I say, well, I want to be married to this supermodel or something, or this movie star. Well, there's only one of them to go around. So if every guy wanted to be married to that same girl, that's not possible, right? So law of attraction, if it really worked, we should all be able to have exactly what we put our mind to. So it's not possible for that to happen. But so if it doesn't, and if it were to happen, then astrology wouldn't work. Because if anybody could attract anything they want or have financial abundance at any point in their life that they wanted, or the level of success they wanted at any point in their life they wanted, then cycles wouldn't exist. Because that would mean that we have full control all the time. And I wouldn't be able to predict a thing using cycles, because it wouldn't be possible to predict, because everybody would have full control over their material reality. So my opinion based on all this is that we don't have full control over our material reality, and we shouldn't. I think it is the egocentric, materialistic reality that a lot of us have grown up in westernized societies, that lead us to believe that we have the ability to attract anything. And so we have a tendency to think, okay, well, if I want this house, I can have this house. If I want this car, I can have this car. But see, each of our souls is here for a different purpose. And not everyone is here for the same purpose. Now, I have a younger brother who makes insane amounts of money. And he doesn't work any harder than I've worked in my life. But he has a chart of somebody who could easily be a multimillionaire. And so he has achieved that, and he's continuing to achieve that. And whereas working as hard as I have, I've never even come close to that, but to that level. And I won't necessarily, from a financial only standpoint, doesn't mean I won't achieve that same level of financial well-being, or that anybody couldn't, but that because his chart is predisposed to that, he is more likely to go in a direction just purely for money, right? So I may achieve that, or anybody may achieve that, but they won't do it for the same reasons. So the reason that we all think that we can apply law of attraction is because we're raised in a society that thinks that way. But every person has built into their journey the things that they're supposed to do. Some of us are here to be multimillionaires and to be real estate tycoons. Some of us are here to be light workers and healers. Some of us are here to be farmers. Some of us are here to be janitors. We all chose that path so that our soul could have a certain experience. And so, but then we're born into this reality and we forget why we're here, because we need to, so we can experience and grow through the experience. But then we're bombarded in our society with the same kind of messaging, right? And so we grow up in a society where we think we've got to live like lifestyles of rich and famous, right? And so we think we want those things, and so we're psychologically conditioned to think that. And so when people apply the law of attraction, they apply it for the same reasons. Majority of people are going for the big house, the big car, they don't actually look within themselves to see, why am I here? What is my purpose? What makes me happy? Because I think the majority of people, if they really gave that some thought, they would realize that they don't necessarily all want the big house, the big car. Some of them, they love dirt and they want to go be a farmer. Some of them, like me, I have this unique ability with healing, and my brother's not going to have that. That's not his purpose, right? So I think that when a person discovers who they really are and what their true purpose is, then law of attraction works naturally. You don't actually have to do anything. You just get out of your own way and things just flow naturally, and then you start wanting to attract the things that you were already meant to have. And so where I think the law of attraction actually does work is not the what you have in your life, but the how. And by that I mean, so if you're a janitor or you're a multimillionaire, you can choose whether you're happy or not. Happiness doesn't come from the money. I've known a lot of very successful people over the years who were miserable people, very unhappy. And I've known people who had nothing, who were just, joyful people all the time. Money does not bring those things. It doesn't bring joy. So the law of attraction, how we should apply it is to apply it to changing how we experience our life, not the what we're experiencing. And that, I think, is where we can alter our experience. But I think Lightworkers in particular need to explore who they are, why they're here, and then apply those techniques to that life direction. And they'll find that they're much happier and they feel more fulfilled and they feel like they have a place in the world. So that's how I think it applies.
When you're talking about all of this and the law of attraction, what we're trying to manifest, the first thing that comes to mind is a soulmate, because I think everyone out there is trying to manifest their perfect soulmate. So give me your understanding of, or maybe even your definition of a soulmate, and how does that tie into astrology and free will choice and what you just talked about?
Well, I've noticed in recent years there are a lot of telesummits out there that have that are devoted specifically to how to attract your soulmate, and a lot of people write articles on how to find your soulmate. And now I've met a lot of my soulmates, and I know that I have because of past life regression, hypnosis, and a variety of other tools that I've used to actually figure that out. So it wasn't just I had a feeling only, and I can tell you that, first of all, I say this jokingly sometimes, that you may not want to meet your soulmate because soulmate relationships are very intense and they're very karmic and they're usually very difficult. A lot of people have this impression that this person is going to be perfect and they're going to be everything you ever wanted, and they're going to uplift you from the burdens of your life, and you're going to live this blissful future together. That does happen sometimes. But more often, this is a soul that you've traveled through lifetimes. And for people who are more evolved in this life, you may even have a parallel life with them in this material reality on Earth now, or even a parallel dimension of some kind, or some other dimension.
Right.
So a soulmate is someone who you've experienced a life journey with. And it may not necessarily be a past life. It could be a present life, could be a future life, could be a parallel life. And that soul may not necessarily have been a romantic partner in every case. It could have been a father in a past life, a mother. And I find that it switches a lot. Sometimes the people who are soulmates in this life in a romantic sense were your parents in a past life, or a sibling or whatever. That tends to switch a lot. In the two girls I mentioned earlier in my story, in one of the lives, I remember the one girl was my wife and the other one was my daughter. In another life, we were just three friends. There were other ones, but I can't remember offhand. But it tends to switch off, and so this is a soul you've traveled with, and it's sort of like somebody who's a soul best friend, and who you've had such a strong connection with, and you're so familiar with that when you meet them, you feel the strength of that connection. But quite often, because you've been through so many life experiences, there are usually a lot of difficult life experiences and a lot of karmic experiences that were challenging. And so a lot of soulmates we meet, there is some karmic issue there. And so it tends to create a lot of suffering and difficulty in the relationship. And the relationship can be very intense. You feel like, I know this person, I love them, but they are just difficult to be with. And I find a lot of times in soulmate relationships, one person is afraid and will run away. That's very common because of something that happened in a past life. And so there can be a lot of difficulties, first of all. Okay. Secondly, you can't apply some kind of law of attraction technique or meditate or visualize and bring in a soulmate, because those kind of things are predestined. And you and that soulmate made that plan before you incarnated into this life to meet at a certain time and have a certain experience. So you can't decide to do that now. Because if you're going to meet them, you're going to meet them when you're going to meet them. And so those it's just a predestined thing. And some people will meet now, and so I'm speaking specifically of romantic soulmates right now.
Right.
Okay. So romantic soulmates, which is what the majority of the soulmate classes and telesummits are about, is to attract that romantic soulmate. You can't attract that romantic soulmate. That romantic soulmate, if they're meant to be with you, will find their way to you at the right time that you both planned on meeting. So there's no sense in doing that. But there was also other soulmates you'll meet along the way. Probably every significant relationship you had in this life is a soulmate of some kind, especially the more intense relationships or the more significant ones. Even your children are probably soulmates. They might have been husband or wife in a past life even. So family is usually has a soul tie, but not to the same degree all the time. Sometimes you have a family member who this may be the first lifetime you've had with them, or maybe it's the second one. Or you may have another family member you've been through hundreds of lifetimes with, and you'll just feel a closeness to that one soul mate, that one person, where you don't feel as close to the other. So it can vary, but so usually your family members are your closest friends. A lot of times are soulmates. But as far as attracting the romantic one, it will come if it's meant for you. And you may not want it sometimes.
So if someone has a soulmate in their life, just going back to the whole astrology, numerology discussion we were talking about, can you look at the two together in terms of their numerology to see what the relationship will be like, or if it's a good match in terms of a partnership?
Well, from a soulmate standpoint, it's not always easy to exactly quantify astrology as to whether or not they're soulmates, but you can usually see it. You can usually see it, especially if it's a difficult soulmate relationship where they have a lot of karmic burden. You can usually see that in the relationship. But from a purely physical, psychological standpoint, yes, you can tell if two people are going to have an easy time or not. I find that 50-60% of relationships are really difficult relationships. People just tend to attract themselves to other relationships that are not very easy ones. And it's for good reason. It's because of karma. If you have a lot of karma, you're going to naturally attract a very karmic heavy relationship that's going to be difficult. And I find that's why the divorce rates are so high, because we attract those kind of very difficult relationships. And yes, you can see that in the chart, and it's quite common. And yes, if you choose, I have a lot of people who, ever since I started doing compatibility analysis for them, they won't even go on a second date until they first consult with me. So they'll forget that person's birthday, send it to me, and I'll say red or green light, and then they'll pursue it further. And every time I tell them, okay, well, this relationship is this way, they'll say, oh, you know what? I can already see that. So they can, even in the first meeting, they can see those dynamics. And you will see that if you pay attention, even in the first meeting, the dynamics of the relationship are all there. Some couples are power couples. They if you put them together, they'll make money and they'll be huge successes, but the relationship is really bad. Other couples, there's just so much love and warmth and caring, and it'll always be there. But they may not make money as much, So those dynamics you can see. You're always going to have to trade off something. You're never going to have the perfect relationship. But I find that there's no reason to have a bad one, though. You can have a very good relationship that when you have stressful things between numerology and astrology of two people, it just makes everything harder. Doesn't mean you can't work it out and still stay together for the rest of your lives and be happy. But it takes a lot more work when the charts are difficult together. And if they're really difficult together, it's almost impossible to do the work because you don't want to. The couple they eventually just give up. But if it's easy, then you find things just flow more harmoniously, and the love and the warmth is there, and you have a tendency to just automatically want to care for that person. And that's what I try to do. If I see a couple and I see the compatibility like that, I will encourage them because I know that 20 years from now, they're just going to naturally want to take care of each other and have this warmth that's built in to the energetics of the relationship. See, a lot of people think that they choose how they are in a relationship, and you do. But there is an underlying vibrational component that you can see in the astrology and the numerology. And that vibrational component will determine how hard it is to choose. So, if the vibrational component is very harmonious, then it's easy to take care of each other. It's easy to make the relationship work. And it's easy 20 years from now to still care about each other and have a good relationship. If it's really difficult, it's so much work and usually doesn't work out.
So beyond the vibrational aspect, and we talked about there's a lot of karmic experiences going on here with relationships. You do have a very diverse background in psychology, and there are a lot of marriages failing right now. What are you noticing that's going on maybe on the planet that might be affecting people from that standpoint as to why these marriages and relationships are breaking up?
Well, okay, so I would come at that from different standpoints. First of all, psychologically, we don't know how to be in relationships. I think that human beings, and it's not their fault, it's because society has conditioned us to think a certain way. And so we're bombarded with messaging constantly that makes us behave a certain way and makes us look for certain qualities in relationships that really are not going to lead to good relationships. And then secondly, we don't know how human beings don't understand. Like men do not understand the psychology of women, and women do not understand the psychology of men. And so we get in these relationships, we expect our partner to think like us and to feel like us, and that's not how it works. There is a distinct difference between the two. And that difference can also vary depending on the name, because if a woman has a very masculine name, she'll behave more like a man. If a man has a very feminine name, he'll behave more like a woman. So that can really screw up the psychology as well, or at least add another level of complexity. And so there is a psychological component. And women, whether they want to admit it or not, there is a psychological tendency of women to favor masculine qualities in a man. And this has been done in many experiments. And for example, let me just share one experiment. They showed women of pictures of men who were dressed in suits and in a business setting. and the men were not at all good looking. In fact, they were very bad looking. And then they showed pictures of men who were really good looking, but dressed in fast food uniforms. Mm-hmm. And the women overwhelmingly chose the men who were dressed in suits. So there is even, and you might think, well, women are materialistic, and a lot of men do think that, but it's not really that. There is a psychological tendency of women to favor men who they feel can take care of them. Even though there is this feminist movement and so on, you cannot override the psychology. Psychology is built in, it is there. And so women have a tendency to favor masculine men. And so you've got to consider that psychological component. So if the man in the relationship does not have those qualities, it automatically causes problems. And if the woman is more masculine, there's a problem there because it goes against the hormonal tendency of each sex to be a certain way. Men typically, not in every case, are more testosterone dominant, and women are more estrogen dominant, which brings out more feminine qualities, and the testosterone brings out more masculine qualities. And this goes back, into our genetics, that we have that sort of difference, and it's no different now. Mm-hmm. Even though we think in our society that that women are equal to men, and in a sense they are, but there is that psychological difference. And without understanding that psychological difference, we can't have good relationships because we don't know how to behave, and we don't understand that difference. So I think that's part of the problem, is we don't know how to treat each other. We don't understand each other. And I think if more couples, when they first became a couple, started going to counseling or started studying psychological differences or even reading books about relationship psychology, they would have a better relationship. I don't think marriage psychology should start when the marriage is falling apart. It should start on the first day you get together, or at least when you first get married. That's when it should start, when there are no problems that are insurmountable. And then you learn those behavior patterns, and you learn how to understand each other, and the relationship can last. So there's that piece. But you're asking about what's happening in the world right now, and I think the people who are watching this show today are a lot of them are light workers, and I think in the session we did with you, or in our last show, you channeled, I believe you channeled this, that these light workers are master light workers, I think you called them, mm-hmm. and so they're a step above just average light workers. So they're on the leading edge of this movement, right? And it makes sense on a network like this. And so with people like that, I find there are a lot of marriages that are going bad or divorces happening. And the reason is because when they married this person, their consciousness level was probably more equal. Mm-hmm. But because in more recent years, there's been this acceleration of growth in consciousness, you have a lot of marriages now where one person's consciousness is very high and one is very low. Mm-hmm. And one person it's like you're living in two-dimensional realities. You may be living in the same house, but you're not living in the same world. And you can't possibly bring that other person up because they're where they are because they're supposed to be. And they don't need to change right now. Whereas you are up here and they're there. And so you can't communicate with each other because you don't understand the world from the same standpoint. And in those instances, you could stay in the relationship if you want to, but you're not going to be able to change that person. And you're not supposed to. And so a lot of divorces, I think, are happening, or relationships, long-term relationships are breaking up because people are starting to evolve so much faster now. And we're going to see more of those kind of breakups in the future, I think, as that process accelerates and more light workers are waking up and finding themselves with partners who are on an entirely different wavelength. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think we should really learn how to treat our partners better and to have more harmonious relationships and a lot of people I've interviewed over the years, I asked this question, have you found that a good relationship has been key to your success? And they all tell me yes. And so I really believe that for anyone to reach their fullest potential, if you have a good relationship, it'll make it that much easier for you to do that, to reach your success level. And so, but it has to be a good relationship. It has to be a harmonious one. And it has to be one where that person is at least fairly close to your level of consciousness. It doesn't have to be the same. But I think that's a lot of what's going on nowadays.
I want to switch gears for a minute, because this show in particular is really about something that's very similar to your mission of the organization Flower of Life, which is bringing positive aspects and things that are going on in our world to Lightworkers so that they can really shift their view of what's happening here. And you interview people from all around the world who are really doing groundbreaking work in a variety of different fields. Can you just give us some things, that are going on now, or just maybe some recent interviews that you've done, or things that come to mind that are emerging right now that you've come into awareness with, that you can share and enlighten us on?
Well, there's so much, and we're heading into this amazing world, and it may not seem like it. A lot of people who watch shows like this are sitting on the forefront and very disenchanted with society as a whole right now, because the mainstream of society appears to be going the wrong way, and that's understandable. But you have to also understand that even a network like this existing in the first place is a sign of something happening. So I find that there's undercurrent of awakening happening in every aspect of society, from the government to the financial system, to technology, to healing. Every area is going through this amazing breakthrough right now, but it hasn't hit the mainstream yet. Now, I think in the 2020s to mid 2040s is when it's going to all emerge to the mainstream. We are now at a point where it's all underneath the surface. But so in the last couple of years, a lot of the interviews I've done have been very fascinating. I've spoken with, there's a Russian scientist I spoke with last year, and he was at our expo actually in 2013. Actually, it was 2 years ago. And he's working on propulsion technology, and he has been also working on Tesla's technology, where he can actually produce electricity from just the environmental energy. And he's got a really cool picture where he's holding like Tesla has this picture of him where he's holding a light bulb in his hand and it's lit up. And this Russian scientist is holding a fluorescent circular light in his hand, and it's lit up. And so he's transmitting that electricity wirelessly, which is something Tesla did as well. But he's been able to produce electricity that way. He also built a propulsion system that actually doesn't, where our conventional propulsion systems, we have fuel that ignites and pushes up against the air and moves aircraft. In his system, there is no fuel that ignites, and it doesn't push up against anything. The system seems to just relocate in space-time, is how he described it to me. And so he apparently built some kind of spacecraft for the Russian space agency, and it's been since classified, so he doesn't know what they did with it. But that's something very interesting. So there are a lot of other people who are working on free energy. There's a company actually in Canada that I'd like to go check out. They are manufacturing and now distributing a generator that will power an average house for about 3 or 4 days, I think about 3 or 4 days, and about 4 gallons of water. And so that's really neat. And it's the first time that something, now I haven't actually seen one of the models yet, but it's the first time that in this area where I've seen something like that available for purchase, for anybody to purchase. So there's that. Now in vibrational healing, there's huge breakthroughs happening. We had Lloyd Muir at our last expo, and he's using frequency numbers to alter health. I don't know, you had some great benefits from that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So he uses numbers to alter the frequencies of the body to alter health conditions or psychological conditions and so on as well. There's Mark Romero, who we had at the last expo. He's going to be at the next one this April as well. And his music I've tested with hundreds of people here locally. And so it's really fun to watch, and people who have already gone through the test are just love to watch me do it on somebody who's never had it done. because the person, it's just disbelief in their face, because what we do is a strength test, which is not quite like kinesiology where you do the hand thing, but I literally put all my weight into their body to try to tip them sideways. And before the music's playing, it's easy to do. Doesn't matter how big they are or how small they are, they all fall over. But when the music is playing, they are just so strong. And even the most frail little old ladies, I cannot push them over. And the person I'm testing, they just all have this disbelief, and they, so it's a really fun experiment that I do at my events. But that's a perfect example. And Mark, a lot like me, comes from a very business background. He's a corporate executive making tons of money, gave all that up to pursue his purpose. And so this is what I'm getting back to the law of attraction just briefly. Somebody like him might think, well, law of attraction, I want to make millions of dollars. And that was his goal, actually. And he was actually, I think he was making a lot of money at that point. And but now he chose a path that is not making as much money, but it is who he is. It's true to his nature. And I think that's what a lot of people need to do. So there's amazing things happening in the field of vibrational healing. We have Ty Bollinger coming to our expo, and he's interviewed a lot of conventional and unconventional health practitioners, and who are curing cancer left and right. Cancer has been cured all over the world. In the U.S., it's not really that easy to do and speak about it publicly, but he's putting out this information, and it's not really rocket science and in terms of curing cancer, but even the fact that this information is reaching a more mainstream audience now, I think that's pretty amazing. So I think in the next 10, 15 years, everyone will know how to cure cancer. And it won't be such an issue anymore. Or even diabetes, for example. It's not really an issue. A lot of people have it, but they don't have to. The cures are out there. And sometimes it's as simple as changing your diet,
Well, there's some fascinating things going on with genetics as well, right? I mean, we can live now.
Right.
I mean, gosh, hundreds of years, right?
Well, I interviewed Peter Garyaev a couple of years ago, and he's a Russian geneticist as well. His interview's on our YouTube channel. And a little hard to understand, though, because he doesn't speak English at all, and we had to translate. But anyway, he is also working in a field that he calls linguistic wave genetics. And basically, at the core of it, it is it's vibrational healing. But it's vibrational healing that he has essentially developed a technique through scientific research. So it's rigorous scientific research that produced this end result. But so I talked to him, and he's worked with different people with different illnesses, and in my conversation with him, he said that he believes that within the next 10 years of his work, he'll be able to extend a person's life to 1,000 years and beyond if they want to, and not old, but where he can actually maintain their age or reverse it even. He said before too long, he'll be able to even reverse it to, say, age 30, a more optimal age, and maintain that youthfulness for 1,000 years if you want to. And so that's where the science is right now. And so that's not holistic science or holistic practice. That is an actual scientific genetic process that he has developed, and he has now been working with people to experiment. He's done experiments where he's been able to grow organs inside animal test subjects, where he's able to stimulate the regeneration of them. So the repercussions of that are, well, if the human body, if an organ gets damaged, we can just simply regrow it, as opposed to trying to find a donor match, right?
Right.
So we can continuously regenerate body parts as we need to, as they get damaged, and maintain our health. So yeah, I mean, that's not that far off, even on the genetic side. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Really amazing. So your organization, Flower of Life, really encompasses a lot of these ideas. Give us a little background, I guess, first on what was your vision and how did you come into founding this organization, and what is it doing in the world now, and how is it a part of all of this?
Well, it's doing there's a lot of moving parts. Well, my vision is still not fully realized. There's a lot still to come, but our expo is one part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But Flower of Life has local events, so we have a lot of classes locally. Like you do channeling events, and I do my local events, and we have other people who do events here locally as well. We have a youth program, Conscious Youth, which is an evening program for kids from 9 to 18 who are either gifted or who want to develop their spiritual gifts and so on, or just be around other kids like them. Because one of the problems in our schools these days is there's no kids who are like that can't find other kids like that, because they don't talk about those kind of things in conventional education. So we're trying to create a platform for them to be able to do that, and ultimately launch an actual year-round school for kids that is very alternative and actually is more empowering. Schools are very disempowering. Public education is, especially in the United States, is very disempowering. Mm-hmm. And it's all about control and managing and conditioning kids psychologically so that when they get out of school, they'll fall into the system and, just become an obedient person in society. Well, we're trying to create a school system that is more self-empowering, where kids can think for themselves and find their own way through life and feel like what they want to contribute is important. So we have that in the works as well. We have Conscious Action, which is an activism arm. And so Conscious Action's focus has been primarily activism, but in a more conscious way. So we're not really about standing on the corner with picket signs and complaining at the problem. We're really more about finding solutions to the problem and executing them. And so that's where that's been primarily focused. We have, long term, I want to do a lot of things in this local community, build an actual center and then bring satellites of that around the world as well. And then the school concept also to spread it. But we're really trying we have so many moving parts right now. And I'm working on documentary films and all kinds of things in the future are part of my vision. So it's a lot of projects and not enough people yet to pull them all off. But I have time. So
so if someone's out there listening and that sounds interesting to them, can they volunteer, and how, where could they fit in and how could they do that?
Well, one of the things that's important to me is everyone on our team, there has to be something personal in it for them as well. Now, so for example, we have people on our team who just had an interest in a particular area, but they had no experience. And to me, when you have an interest, I think that's more important than when you have experience. Mm-hmm. Because if you have an interest and a passion for that, you probably have a natural ability for it. And it's just a matter of giving them the opportunity to express that. So we have lots of opportunities. I mean, you can be on our expo team, and there are so many different diverse positions there, from social media to running the event. You can help us run our Conscious Youth program. We can, if you're local, you could do that. If you want to open up a satellite office to one of our programs in your area, that would be great. We could certainly use help in our Conscious Action activism movement. We need people who are videographers, editors, any talent imaginable. There is a place in the vision of where we're going as an organization. It's way bigger than, we've just barely gotten started at the point we are now. So anybody who wants to be a part of this. And the other thing that's important to understand is we're not just any organization. And I wouldn't just put anybody on our team. Mm-hmm. We're very careful about choosing people of a high consciousness, and I'll sometimes have Barb even evaluate them, what their aura is like, to see if I should include them on the team or not. Even our expo volunteers, who their only purpose is to help at the expo itself, we evaluate that. They have a mission statement that they have to follow and uphold in the work they do, that they're there to be healers and light workers, and they're not just there to open doors and check tickets.
Right.
And so we wouldn't accept just anybody. And so by joining this team, you are in a team of amazing people, very high consciousness, and people who are going to do some big things in the world if they're not already. So yeah, we could, we'd be happy to have them. So yeah, and let's see, we have, what other programs do we have? The school really needs a lot of work still. We do want to launch it in the next couple of years. We are going to need a good location for that. That's one of the things that's kind of holding that back. Our events primarily at this point have been anyway up to this point donation based, and we don't really make a lot of money on our local events. Our expo is the only thing that really is something that we charge for because we have to, because it's such an expensive event to do.
Right.
And so a lot of our events have been that way, and so we really need to find a good location that would be good for us. And I've even thought about maybe even building one using like there's a new old form of architecture called Vastu architecture, which is really a lot of the ancient cities around the world. The structures are built with this architecture, and so my vision is to actually build a center that is built with this architecture, because it automatically creates certain energetic resonance and a healing resonance within the environment. So just by stepping into the space, you're experiencing healing. So that is part of the vision that I have for this future physical center where we hold all these events. So we need help in every area, and we can't possibly pull all this off without a lot more people.
Yeah. And as a part of the organization, I can really say, because I've had a front row seat to watching the people, that have come onto the team as volunteers. Really, I think it's a mix of, working with your energy field and opening yourself to your gifts and what your soul is meant to do, but also the entire energetic of the team, and, really experiencing all of these breakthroughs firsthand and interacting with people all over the world. I've just seen people on our team take off in a variety of different directions, and obviously all light workers as well. So,
right.
So I guess, we have a few minutes left if we want to talk a little bit more about the expo and maybe some of the speakers that you have lined up to come onto the show in the coming weeks, because I know we're going to be interviewing some of those speakers. So maybe we can talk about, who we're going to have on the show next and who's coming up.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact schedule, but we do have Dr. Sam Osmanovic, who is the archaeologist in the Bosnian Pyramid Project. So he'll be on one of the shows coming up. We have Jay Jagadish, who is the Spirit Voyage recording musician, who will be doing a Friday night event, concert. Amazing voice. I love her voice. Yeah. And she'll be doing a authentic voice, was it called?
She's doing a workshop. It's called Opening Your Authentic Voice. It's a Kundalini workshop where you'll really dig in deep and open your soul to that. So I think it's a 3-hour experience.
Class. And it's unique. It's not, it's her unique thing, right?
Oh, yeah. That's something that she's very gifted in.
So I'm going to be interviewing her soon. I don't remember who else actually, but let's see.
Mandara Cromwell, who I think will be a very interesting interview.
Right.
Cymatics, and she is with the International Sound Healing Association. So she'll be enlightening your audience with that.
Yeah, so we'll have those 3 coming up. I don't remember who else we have scheduled, but everybody on our presenter list, I may even re-interview some of them on this show as we head into the expo. So it's a lot of really interesting ones coming up.
Can you talk a little more specifically about the astrology that you're seeing that's coming up that's representative of this shift?
Yeah, well, Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn and has been for a number of years, and the planet Uranus is in the sign of Aries. And those 2 signs are at 90 degrees to each other. And so whenever you have 2 planets at 90 degrees to each other, that's considered a difficult influence, or in astrology is called a hard aspect. And so what happens is the influences of the 2 planets are really pulling against each other. They're trying to, in a way, you might say, they're two forces trying to win. So Capricorn is the sign that is opposite Cancer. And when Pluto was in Cancer has to do with emotions, okay? And the last time Pluto was in Cancer was in the 1930s during the Great Depression. So Cancer represents emotions, hence depression, okay? And so when you have Pluto in Cancer, people give up. They really want to give up, and they have to find that emotional strength. When it's in Capricorn, it's the opposite sign, but it has similar effects. And every time Pluto, and this from a financial market standpoint, when Pluto and Uranus are in hard aspect to each other, it tends to create some kind of market instability or market crash. So every time we've had that happen, there has been a market problem in the markets. So, especially if Saturn also gets involved, which it was in the past years during the beginning of all that. So in a way, this time that we're in is kind of similar to the Great Depression. It's just the opposite. But when it's in Capricorn, what you have is Capricorn is really representative of the establishment, the government, the systems, the structure. It is representative of the Saturn, planet Saturn. And so Pluto in Capricorn, you have a society where the structures are being reinforced, and people in power become very, very powerful, and who try to control the people. So when you have Pluto in Capricorn, that's really a control influence. So in the past years, we've had the Patriot Act. We've had so much. We talked about Common Core earlier. Right. We have so many restrictions on people now, ever since Pluto went to Capricorn. Now, it stays in Capricorn until I think 2023 or 24 or something like that. So somewhere around the next decade, or maybe it was early 2020s, off the top of my head, I can't remember. But when it goes into the next sign, which is Aquarius, it's going to be a different experience. So prior to Capricorn, it was in Sagittarius, which is the sign that Jupiter represents, which is expansion. And that's when our markets really took off, right? People bought Hummers and bought gigantic houses, and we overdid things because Jupiter overdoes things. Capricorn is the opposite. It goes the other way. It's overly conservative, and when Pluto's there, it's very controlling. So now couple that with Uranus, which is at 90 degrees to it right now, in the sign of Aries. And so when you have Uranus in Aries, you have rebellious people. Okay, so on the one hand, we have a controlling government and system, and we have rebellious people. And so you put the two together, and that's what you've seen in recent years. You've seen the Wall Street marches and protests around the world. You had the abuse of power by organizations and corporations and the banking industry, but people fighting against it. Right. You know, we've had suppression in so many areas of society, but we've also had these breakthroughs, right? So when Pluto goes into Aquarius, Aquarius is the sign that is representative of Uranus, which is representative of freedom, independence. When that happens, you're going to see free energy technology. You're going to see people have more freedoms. So right now, we're being inhibited from our freedoms. When it goes into Aquarius, all those freedoms are going to be given back and then some. So we're going to see a freer society. We're going to see technological innovations because Uranus is really representative of that. We'll probably see our computer technology even go to a new level. I don't imagine what that is at the moment, but we'll probably see computer technology that's on an entirely different level. So innovations in technology, freedoms, independence, you're seeing all those things now, even with networks like this, right? So the people will finally win when it goes into Aquarius, where it'll stay until the mid-2040s. And then Pluto goes into Pisces, which is representative of a spiritual revolution. So we're going to see really huge growth in consciousness after that. Although it's going to even be going on throughout this period of time, it'll really expand even further beyond that. So just in a general sense, that's some of the astrology behind what's taking place in the world right now that we're going through. But we have to just make it to the end of this decade to get past that that push-pull influence while Pluto still remains in Capricorn.
Okay. Well, thank you for being with us today, Ethann. That was amazing information and a lot of great story to take in. And those of you who are looking for more information about how to contact you, maybe you can let them know the best
Well,
way.
if you're interested in our expo, go to awakenapartexpo.com or AAEexpo.com and come join us as a volunteer or attend the event. There's lots of cool stuff going on there. If you want to get in touch with me personally for any reason, you can email me at info@ethannfox.com, Ethann with 2 N's, or just go to my website, ethannfox.com, or you can just search online for me and you'll find lots of interviews and information and links to the various websites as well. So that's another way to get in touch with me also.
And Ethann will be back next week, Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Central Time or 12 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Sunday.